Hello and welcome to the TRILUX Academy. My name's Helen Looms.
And my name's Jamie Yates.
And we want to share with you the first of our new training modules. Today's subject is indoor-outdoor light around the building. So really we want to bring your attention to the light that we use on the outside of the building, which could have originated from the inside, or it could be dedicated lighting from the outside to create an effect. Exterior lighting can really enhance the outdoor environment. It can create a heightened sense of place, and it can extend the use of the place well into the night time, contributing to a real or even perceived sense of security. On a broader scale, nighttime lighting can generate a feeling of civic pride. It can draw people out to use a space that they might not have otherwise used, in the same way as perhaps a road sign could do. This is going to guide people to where you want to use them within the civic environment. We also need exterior lighting to be functional. We need to be safe, but it's also the area where we can start to have a bit of fun.
Yes, the more artistic side of building illumination.
So exterior lighting can really enhance the exterior of a building.
It can also change it, so it can look one way during the day and then completely change at night, just from the lighting.
Yes, this is when it's putting on its finest clothes. How about this magnificent hotel on the Tatra? This is the Kempinski Grand Hotel, and I like the way that both the light and shade are used to create this. The turrets are lit beautifully, and then you've got all those shadows in the lake which really give a magical effect. And using light in contrast to shade has a much greater effect. Yeah,
don't forget the importance of shade, so it's very important to have an absence of light as well as the addition of light as well.
Yes, this way you can keep fairly low levels. You're not having to overlight your environment.
And obviously that'll keep the energy levels low as well, so obviously we don't want to influence dark skies issues. We want to put the light where we need it, and as Helen said, we can keep the levels at a fairly low and low energy level. You can also see the main facade or the main block of the building sort of obviously stands out a little bit more, so you know that's the hub.
That is the focal point of the building. This is drawing you to the building, and then all of the other elements just add a touch of magic. You can use the same techniques with a much more modern building, and here various elevations and angles are highlighted just to give them that bit more prominence and this little touch of blue.
I think this looks computer generated, but it's not.
I know, it looks computer generated. I can promise you it's a real photograph. In fact, here's another one that's taken during the daytime.
Yeah, there's a lot of really detailed architecture there, so it's giving the lighting designer a lot to work with. So this is obviously a project that there's obviously a certain amount of pride taking place here, and you can see that they've actually probably had quite a good and fun time designing this particular scheme.
Dream project.
Yeah, there's some really nice architectural detail in there.
Yes, yeah. And then also, light can be used to give a sense of occasion to a venue.
This is Cheltenham Racecourse.
Cheltenham Racecourse, yeah. Beautiful scheme, this one. It looks much more exciting and grand at night time than it does do during the daytime. And then also, you can take it to the extreme opposites. We can beautify a very natural area late into the night. This is a very delicate scheme at cloisters.
This sort of leads on from what I was saying over. It's about the lack of light, or making sure that it's embracing the darkness as well.
Yes, and within this situation especially, because lighting snow can be very tricky, you get a lot of reflected light, so this is going to contribute even more to the dark sky problem. So we need to keep the light levels very low, but the eye does adjust to very low levels of light.
Indeed.
And you can create just as significant an effect.
With the low levels of light, we can also ensure that the energy levels are kept low as well, so you can create a very high impact environment from a lack of light and using a very low amount of power as well.
Absolutely. But lighting also means we can extend recreation into the night time. We can use our parks well into the evening. We can use other areas of beauty that might be within the city centre as well. In fact, we can even use lighting to enhance areas that would naturally be thought of as an eyesore.
Like under a motorway.
Under a motorway. This is just an amazing scheme here. It's part of the Social City programme of lighting in the German town of Neuwied. So here they had a very antisocial environment. It split the town centre from the external areas of the town, which were more residential.
Okay.
And it was a real scene of crime. So by adding lighting, recreation equipment, trees, seating, it's now become a place that the residents use, and it has a much better sense of feeling safe, and has just completely transformed what was a dangerous place into something that
It
people
also
enjoy.
looks like it's got multi activities in there.
Yeah,
It looks like a basketball court in there and some play equipment.
Gym equipment, things like this.
So it's a combination of sort of bringing lighting into the space as well as sort of bringing other civic elements into the environment, and those all combined together are creating a change in the area.
As with everything to do with lighting, you can't just concentrate on one element. It's the total that adds up to the full effect. Of course, the biggest use for exterior lighting is where we want to draw the crowds. The need for inspirational lighting and to create a more cafe-type society within our urban areas is actually encouraged by the planners these days. So we are being encouraged to do these things, but always to do it sensitively and not try and create Trafalgar Square everywhere.
Indeed. I mean, you'll see from the image here, whilst the space is lit and you've got the walkway that is lit and also the architectural feature to the left, you'll notice also that the cafe seating itself is actually in a relatively low level of light, probably to allow things like candles to be put onto the tables and things like that. So it's also about creating back again to the sort of like a lack of light with light to create a certain level of ambience.
But there's nothing like light to draw people into a space, like moths to those candles on those tables.
Indeed.
And then, of course, people attract other people and you start to create a buzz in the evening. I really couldn't resist including this slide. This is the slide that I think feels we should all be worshipping the light source. And this is much like many TRILUX employees and our colleagues. We all
worshipping a 600 by 600.
We are worshipping the light panel. The lighting of the interior itself can be used to create an effect at night time. In fact, the retail sector do this a huge amount. They will use their shop windows to create an effect. You can do the same with office buildings and other municipal buildings as well.
Yeah, because a lot of buildings will have a glass facade, so you can use the interior lighting within the sort of reception space to create an external lit scene, should we say.
Absolutely. The key here is to make sure that you are reducing the levels at night time.
Whilst you can reduce the levels of lighting within that sort of reception space, you may also have security guards there anyway that need to operate within that environment, but also what you're doing is you're creating a externally lit lighting design, but at low levels and maybe with a lack of external lighting as well, or maybe you don't have the space to put external lighting.
It's very nice to consider this aspect of lighting at the early stages of planning so that you can use some extra lighting on the inside, usually reception, near the facade, just to create that effect from outside. It could even be a little bit of colour at that stage as well.
So you could use luminaires that are inside the building that are white during the day but have got maybe an RGBW element to introduce sort of subtle levels of colour throughout the evening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is a car park in Blackpool where controls are programmed to fade, increase the colour shift, or even they're slightly animated as well. So the subtleties of colour and brightness can be used to draw your attention to this building, but they can also be used to highlight a certain feature. If there's something happening within the town, if there's a certain festival on.
An event or something.
Absolutely. So here they have full freedom to use colour in any way they want to, depending on what's happening in the local environment.
I suppose you could also use it for a local football team to support the
Absolutely.
local colours and things like that.
Yes, if they've had a good win. So any large development is likely to have a multitude of different types of circulation routes, pathways, primary routes, and even main trunk roads. And they all need lighting. But then you come down to other areas such as recreational spaces, parks, car parks, and if you've got a river or some other natural feature buffering, again you can enhance them all with light at night time.
So you've got the sort of natural architecture as well as the built architecture as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how are we going to start lighting these spaces? And here I think we need to look at some of the regulations that are involved so that we meet all the regulations but then understand how to use them to create the effect that we're wanting. We have many tried and tested standards and regulations. However, for the exterior we have an even wider choice. Most agree in principle with just a few changes to details, for instance whether they require a uniformity or a minimum to maximum level. At a European and international level we have the CIE, the CEN and the ISO, International Standards Organisation. In the UK we have the British Standard Institute, which is supported at a detailed level by other associations such as the Society of Light and Lighting or the ILP. Local authorities might also have additional requirements, and it's possible you might need a more detailed specialist guidance such as the Dark Sky Authority. One place to start is with the Society of Light and Lighting Handbook, which has a new edition published last year in 2018. It is based on BS-EN 12464, which was in itself updated a couple of years ago. It is worth noting that if we're considering an open space that is privately owned, technically it's classed as a workplace, and interestingly these spaces have very similar requirements to lighting for indoor workspaces. We still need to make sure that we meet the requirements of visual comfort, visual performance and safety, and to do this we have to understand the characteristics of the lighting we're planning in terms of luminaire distribution, illuminance, hopefully lack of glare, which is a function of the direction of light. And then we must also remember colour rendering and appearance, which is gaining much more prominence in the requirements of outdoor lighting. And then there's also flicker, which has recently become a much more serious topic. The Society of Light and Lighting also produce guides in addition to the handbook. This here is Lighting Guide 6, which is the Exterior Environment 2016. And it gives many more suggestions and solutions that can be utilised above the minimum requirements. It widens the scope to include visual comfort, sense of place, wayfinding, safety, and how to balance between lit and unlit spaces. It also details the nighttime function of the eye, effects on animal and plant ecology, and also emergency lighting. The ILP also have very good guides on outdoor lighting, and these vary from street lighting requirements through to the impact of artificial light on invertebrates. Inappropriate external lighting is a potential environmental nuisance. Artificial light should always be delivered to the point where it's required and nowhere else. So issues such as brightness, direction and context also need to be considered in the development of the external lighting design to ensure that light pollution and light spill is avoided. The ambient brightness of a space will vary depending on its location, and guidance gives criteria for appropriate lighting in comparison with its surroundings. There are some classifications here which vary from the darkest, E0, which are protected areas where no electric lighting at all is permitted, through to the brightest, E4, which encompasses urban areas with high district brightness, such as a city centre with a busy nighttime economy. Some projects will have many specific requirements. Dark sky parks are areas of outstanding natural beauty with exceptional views of starry skies and nocturnal habitat. Here, no light pollution is allowed at all, whether from direct upward light or even reflected light. And in some environments it is possible that a lighting visual impact assessment will be needed, and this is usually for new developments, and its purpose is to minimise light pollution and glare. Taking the subject of obtrusive light even further is this wonderful guide from the IAC in Chile and the Canaries. This is a strange combination of places, but they are both very important to astronomers with observatories in Chile, Hawaii and the Canaries. The Instituto de Astrofísica de Canarias is an international research centre in Spain. Now, the exceptional quality of the sky of the Canaries for observations is protected by law, and its sky quality group continuously monitors the observing quality at the IAC observatories. Currently, there is an abundance of information about the effects on certain migratory species guided by starlight, or about mass deaths of turtles disoriented by lights on the beaches where they were born. But the reality is the spread of artificial light into natural surroundings has many repercussions that are less well known or less obvious. Particularly significant is the alteration of marine plankton, which affects the marine food chain and the balance between predator and prey. We generally forget that more than half of all living beings are nocturnal, and therefore the diminished quality of the night sky will progressively and certainly unpredictably affect the balance of the biosphere. This guide also touches on the effects of light pollution on human health, which is something we still have an awful lot to find out about. Emergency lighting should always be provided, and it is a legal requirement, both on the outside as well as the inside of the building. In BS 5266 Part 1, it states that the emergency lighting should be provided through to the place of safety, which is usually to the muster or assembly points, and must include provision for changes of direction and level. The light levels required vary enormously. Exterior places of work can be illuminated to very high levels, if you think of something like a train or a vehicle maintenance yard. And similarly, if people have to move from very bright interiors, such as a supermarket, to a dark exterior, they may have problems adapting to the much lower level of emergency illuminance. As a general guide, the illuminance in the immediate vicinity and the route to the exterior muster point should be no less than 5% of the working or interior illuminance. And designers of external lighting systems have a legal responsibility to minimise health and safety issues associated with their designs under the Construction, Design and Management Regulations of 2015. They are obliged to provide a designer's risk assessment that covers the lighting installation design from a health and safety standpoint.
So let's look at a few specific scenarios, and we can start with car parks.
My favourite.
We all love a good car park. So when we're looking at car parks, we have to determine what light levels we need. And for me, the easiest place to look is the Society of Light and Lighting Code for Lighting. Now, this always aligns itself to other British, European and international documents, so BS 5489, EN 13201.
Also the British Car Parking Association as well.
Absolutely. But fortunately for us, most people do agree on the light levels. But of course, the level you're looking to achieve is dependent on the amount of traffic that's happening there and what usage the space has. The greater the usage, the higher the light levels.
It's also quite important as to whether it's a public car park or whether it's a private car park. So if it's a private car park, you've got staff that will be using it, which is very different to how you would treat a retail car park.
Yes, and again, it's down to the usage. In a retail car park, hopefully, lots of people are going to use it.
Yeah, and also they also tend to have slightly higher light levels because they're trying to attract maybe a certain level of clients as well.
Yes, yes. So car parks need lighting from several directions because you're using a space where you could be having high-sided vehicles. You've got to make sure you're not creating shadows that can hide criminals.
Yes, we also need even uniformity and
Yes.
uniform illumination, because you'll be, maybe you're accessing the boot of your car, and then once you lift the boot up, you're then potentially in shadow from one particular direction. So that's why you've got lots of movable objects within the space of a car park, so you need the light coming from various different angles as well.
There is one area where you might actually want to achieve shadows. So if you're using CCTV cameras and you want to see people in silhouette,
Yeah.
This is an area where you could use light from just one direction, purely for the camera. So you have to determine your usage first and then decide which lighting technique will work for you the best.
And you can also model the camera within Relux and Dialux to determine how much light is hitting the lens of the camera to then work out would it be black and white mode or would it be in colour mode. Generally, CCTV cameras these days can operate at very, very low light levels as well.
But certainly the CCTV manufacturer will give you very detailed information
They will,
on what they require from the lighting. But another thing you have to concentrate on is not using lighting that is too low. For instance, using bollards in a car park doesn't always work because a lot of vehicles will completely obstruct any light coming from a bollard.
Also, you don't want to be driving towards a vast array of bollards because your eyes will then be drawn to the light coming from the bollards rather than the space that you're meant to be driving down as well.
True. But also you need to think about the usage of the space and the times that could be used. So having lighting that can dim during the depths of the night would certainly save a lot of energy as well. And there might be peak usage times if it is a retail one when the shops are opening.
Indeed.
So switching or automatic controls could be a very good idea in a car park. Another scenario that's very interesting to look at are pedestrian pathways. Now this picture shows you a pathway illuminated just by bollards, and you can see that there's very definite lit walkways. This gives people this sense of place that we were talking about and guidance as well. And security. The regulations for lighting pathways are very, very varied. We can light from
about 2 lux to about 15 lux?
Yes, so this is low traffic volume through to the higher pedestrian traffic volume. And when you're lighting pathways, one of the things you're trying to achieve is a fairly good level of uniformity. However, with pathways, we don't express it as uniformity. We're expressing it as minimum to average light levels.
Indeed.
And this is something that we should consider. The maximum should not be so far out of the average. In other areas, it doesn't matter if you've got some peak high levels of lighting. When you're looking at pathways, keeping it a lot more even is something that would be a lot more desirable.
You can also, depending upon the optics of the bollards as well, can have a huge impact on how many bollards you physically need over the length of a path as well, can't you?
This is something that people don't always take into consideration with a bollard. A bollard's just a bollard. But
bollards.
But really, if you look at the optics of a bollard, you can certainly make a big difference on the quantity of luminaires you're going to need. If you're lighting a pathway, as in that picture, you can use a very broad distribution, broad, narrow distribution to just light the pathway, and then you can space your bollards much further apart. Here there's a little chart showing you different light levels and different spacings.
And it's all coming from different photometric sort of
That's
proportions
right. So
coming out of the luminaires.
you can see there's polar curves showing the distribution from each bollard. And if you pick the widest, narrowest polar curve, you can space your bollards much further apart and get better uniformity as well. So don't forget to look at the distribution of your bollards. Another area where pedestrians are very often congregating are pedestrianised zones within town centres.
Sort of touched on the cafe culture that we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely. And these days town centres very often have somewhere where there's an open square, there could be water features, lots of things going on. Again, you want to attract people in the evening. So when it comes to facades, it's really interesting to see how we can use landmarks to help people navigate throughout the space. They're acting as visual markers and they confirm the identity of a space. So landmarks could be a civic building, it could be a church, tower, it could even be a natural feature, a rocky outcrop, bridges, lots of things add identity to a location. So we can help to bring these to life at night time. And there's some lovely techniques you can do to really bring out the best in a facade. So understanding the building you're trying to light and where it is is key to everything. So if you're looking at an area that's very well lit, sort of think of Times Square, you're going to have to do something really dramatic to stand out. However, if you're in a more quiet, subdued area, a small church in a small village, you only need a tiny bit of light to really make an impact. So the first thing you have to do is think about your surroundings. It's also how the building fits within context of the space. So you have to understand the approach to the facade.
The approach is the way people walk towards it or
the
drive towards it.
main visual direction of the facade, because that's where you're going to create your biggest impact. So at this time you have to start looking at the building, looking at all of the elements of it, and trying to understand what you want to do. Just a quick word about 3D renderings. It's very tempting to think you should do a 3D rendering to show your client what it's going to look like.
Very time consuming.
It's very, very time consuming and of very limited accuracy. You would give your client a picture which might not truly reflect what's going to happen.
What should we do? Get the samples and get out there and play?
Absolutely. Playing is always good. So just taking a light fit in there, shining it up the wall of the building, seeing how it impacts with everything else that's going on.
Just a minor change in angles or distances can actually make quite a big impact, can't they?
It really does, and it's great to try actually do that hands-on. So 3D renderings have their place, but don't rely on them.
A little bit old school.
Yes, yes. So when it comes to facade lighting, it takes many forms, and you're trying to reveal the details of the building. So it could be the window mullions, it could be columns, it could be a change in stone or brick. So all of these things you're trying to decide which is the most important element and what are you going to concentrate on. Because if you try and do everything, you'll end up overlighting the building, bleaching out some of the features and reducing it to a blank.
Reducing its impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So choose what elements you want to design and focus on them. Another word about windows. You have to realise that at night time, light shining on a window just reflects a black, empty pool. Because glass does not reflect the light, it will go straight through. So against your whole lit facade, you're going to have these black areas where the windows are, which can look great.
And if you're lighting it from the inside as well?
That's completely different. So you can use a completely different technique. So windows can look great, and usually the mullions around the windows are some of the most ornate parts of the building.
Details.
So you probably do want to light those. Also, another thing to consider is that we have, for many years, used the generic term floodlighting. And that comes back from the days when all we had were very large light sources, huge great floodlight luminaires, and you splurged the building. Nowadays, we have LED technology, we have
tight control.
Beautiful small luminaires with tightly controlled beam angles, different colour temperatures. We can really add detail. We've got a fine brush stroke these days. It doesn't just have to be completely washed. But we do have to use both techniques. So if you think about close offset to a building and grazing up a wall, you're going to reveal all the shadows of the stones and you're going to reveal the texture.
And any mistakes in the brickwork or things like that.
Of course, there are no mistakes in the brickwork. But at the same time, you can do something further away with a much narrower beam, and you can start to pick out a few beautiful details. So some window mullions, a clock face, whatever you want to do with this fine brushstroke on top of the more general grazing light. So there's three techniques here really. There's grazing up the facade of the building, there's fine highlighting of elements, and then there's the combination of the two.
Okay.
And the combination of the two can work. But here you can see there's a building which has a very plain facade. This is the railway station in Arnsberg.
So there's not much sort of intricate detail there,
There's not a lot happening there, but there are some quite interesting shadows.
And it's quite a nice shape and very symmetrical.
Absolutely. So in this instance, a broad brush stroke, evenly lighting the whole of the front, enhances the architecture and brings out that simplicity. However, if we want to start to highlight some areas, we can do the same. Here you can see a church where we've used a very, very fine beam to highlight the steeple.
Has that been coming in from a distance?
That's from a distance from one of the columns, and then you've got some floodlights from the base of the building in the ground going up, revealing the texture of the stone. And they've also used slightly different colour temperatures here as well, to show the difference between the two. Sometimes you might want to try and soften strong modelling. If you've got some very detailed accent lighting, like here, you've got the columns really being highlighted, and then you've got all of those beautiful arches up at the top being lit as well. So you might need to soften this a little bit.
Because there's a lot of detail in that facade.
There's a lot of detail going on there. So in this instance, rather than putting in some floodlighting to sort of just bleach it out a tiny bit, they've actually used the street lighting. So you can use what you've got. If you've got street lighting, bring it into your scheme. Make use of it. Don't try and just ignore that it's there.
Yes.
Once you have lit the facade of your building, you might want to think about the trees that are surrounding it. You can have some really great effects lighting up trees. And you can do this in two ways. You can use the tree as a silhouette against the building. So if you've lit a facade, the tree in front of it will be in darkness and you'll see the silhouette, which is lovely. Or you can actually treat the tree as an object and light it up. I think one word of warning is you only need a very small amount of light to light a tree. And you also have to consider whether it's deciduous or evergreen. Is it going to have leaves in the winter? If it hasn't got leaves in the winter and you've splurged light up the trunk, it's going to go up into the sky and have no effect whatsoever. But if you think about it and light it sensibly, you can have a really fabulous effect. You can do very interesting things with just 50 watts. It doesn't have to be a lot of energy, it doesn't have to be a lot of light. You should consider the luminaire you're using and the beam angle that you're using, the distribution of light, because this can have a very, very different effect, especially on the shape of the tree.
And also the canopy.
That's right. So if it's a lovely canopied tree, you can light up to it and do something really broad. If it's a conifer that's very tall and narrow, treat it as a pillar. And again, play. This is such fun.
So we had a light night not too long ago, I think it was last summer, wasn't it? Where literally we got out a large range of our exterior luminaires and we had a play around with them. We used the trees that are outside the office, which unfortunately weren't particularly big, but there was a slight advantage to that because you were involved in these pictures that we can see.
Yes, it was me climbing up the tree, into the canopy of the tree, so fortunately they were very small. But I was up there with one luminaire and there was another one at the base of the tree. And we tried different spreader lenses, we tried narrow beam, broad beam.
Bringing the luminaire away from the tree whilst also in the canopy. And
lots of different combinations and different colour combinations as well. So it was really interesting to see what effects we could achieve. A lot of them worked well.
But the thing was that we found out from this is you have to play with it.
You do have to play. And again, we found out that you only need a small amount of light.
Yeah.
These were 500 lumens apiece, 7 watts.
Yeah.
So almost no light. And we really did produce something that had an impact on the nighttime environment. We should also consider subsidiary roads.
So these are the roads around the building?
Yes, I mean, we're not really talking about street lighting as such, but there are plenty of unadopted roads, private roads, especially on industrial estates, that you might have to become involved with.
Or even within a large site itself, so they may have their own car park and maybe a distribution access and then a road network throughout that as well.
Absolutely. And within these, we do have to meet the appropriate standards as well. It might be expedient to do so because they could be adopted at some time in the future as well.
Or just good practice.
Very good practice, yes. The standards are there for a reason. But within this category, there are some considerations we haven't discussed yet.
Yep.
So we're thinking about energy savings measures, which should be part of every lighting design consideration.
Exactly. So obviously, aside from the facade lighting and the more artistic lighting that we've spoken about, which obviously can be done very energy efficiently, things like street lighting can be large consumers of power. So there's a number of different options that you have available to you to be able to help reduce not just the power load from the LED lighting itself, but also to add controls to it to enable you to sort of maximise upon that, depending upon the operation of the environment. So one of the functions is power reduction, or what we call load reduction, LR, and that basically has a system in it whereby it turns off 50% of the LEDs. So in effect you can create 2 circuits to a particular street light or a luminaire, and you can switch one circuit on or off separate from the second circuit as well. So you may be operating the primary circuit, 50% of the luminaires, during all of the period, also all 10 hours of darkness, but then the secondary circuit only maybe for the hours of, maybe in winter time, 5 p.m. through to 10 p.m, and then the other hours you're kind of leaving in, not in darkness, but in a reduced level. Light level. Yeah, exactly.
And this can be done automatically?
Well, that then leads on to the next one, which is the automated load reduction. So the first one is actually more of a switching mechanism, and you may use a daylight sensor or a Royce sensor that might be on top of the luminaire to do that switching. The automated load reduction, basically it self-regulates, so it measures the luminaires on time from the previous day, and then it will assess that and then turn off 50% of the LEDs within the luminaire in the middle 7 hours that it's operational. So it'll know whether it's in summertime or winter time, because the hours will vary, and it'll just switch off 50% of the luminaires for the middle 7 hours. So it's automated and you don't need any extra controls.
So this is to reduce your output and your loading during the part of the night when it's very unlikely.
Exactly, when it's less busy. So especially when you're looking at private roads that might be attached to commercial premises, and a lot of commercial premises obviously during the night hours may not be operational, or even if it's a logistics warehouse where you've got something like that and you are operational 24/7, but the actual amount of traffic that's happening can be at a lower level. Or if there is an impact on that and you do need to operate at the higher levels, then you wouldn't necessarily use the automated version. You use the version which you can also control. 2 other final ones, you've got constant lumen output, CLO, and that will basically regulate the luminaire so that it achieves the same lux level that you are looking to try and achieve across the board for the lifetime of the luminaire, but it will increase the power as the luminaire life goes on to account for the loss that you would normally see on an LED luminaire. So an LED luminaire would normally drop. The natural degradation.
Yes. So in most lighting calculations, we start by overlighting an installation.
We carry out a maintenance factor calculation.
Yes. So we're overlighting and expecting the LEDs to reduce in output, and so the average is the light level that we originally calculated. However, by using constant lumen output, using just a very simple device within the luminaire itself, within the control gear, you can start by underrunning the luminaire at the beginning and then ramping it up to counteract this loss of output from the LED.
It almost acts a little bit like a daylight sensor, but without the daylight sensor.
Entrance areas are one area that I think we can really make a bigger impact with lighting. And again, this could be from inside the building or outside the building. Good exterior lighting makes a statement about your office. It draws attention from a distance, and even as you're approaching the building, it's giving the public the ethos of your building. It's giving them your statement of what your company stands for. So exterior lighting really can make a difference and should be considered as just an important part of your brand identity, as your logo. So the exterior in this entrance is something where it's very tempting to go a little bit overboard. This is one of the areas where we can use colour, but again, it should be used with caution.
So it's not just about the architecture, it's also about the company ethos.
Absolutely.
So you probably need to have the brand manager involved in any particular decisions here.
Absolutely. You know, stick with your brand colour, but do it subtly. Think about whether you are a lively, young, hip environment, or whether you're a traditional bank.
Or whether you're a medical company or some such.
Yes, yeah. So this entrance area does a bit of everything. So you have got the interior lighting, which is giving a statement to the exterior. You've got some very subtle lighting on the stairways and a little bit of colour, just that touch of colour to say who we are.
And they're a marine company, so they're blue.
Yeah, and if you can see their logo on the glass there, it's exactly the same colour as the blue lighting that's lighting up that decorative bit in the middle of the steps.
I also noticed they've got stairway lighting as well, so there's obviously an element of functionality they've had to build into the entrance.
Yes, as with all lighting, you have to consider the safety side of things and why it's there, from allowing people to come and go, as well as the decorative element of it as well. So I think for me, all exterior lighting is just as big a consideration as anything we put on the inside of the building. And it's really fascinating to see how you can build up effects by adding layers of exterior lighting. And I just want to run through this sequence of visualizations done by one of our designers, where he's carefully built up these layers, and as we move away from the building, you can start to see the whole effect that he's trying to achieve. So he started with some buried in-ground LED strips that lights up the facade.
So these are sort of grazing the wall?
Absolutely, especially the bit in between these where there's some texture on the wall, and these LED strips reveal that texture. And then he's added in some recessed spotlights by the columns to give them some prominence, and matching ones further up the facade, so these are wall-mounted fittings, to do the same higher up the building. And again, similar LED strips are used in a wall-mounted version at first floor level. There's some surface-mounted decorative spotlights under the canopy and some recessed spots at the entrance, which combine to give a functional, but it is an attractive light as people arrive. And then drawing away a little bit, there are some small wall-mounted decorative direct-indirect luminaires that match the surface-mounted ones, but here it's a very narrow beam, so this is used for a decorative effect. Some recessed wall-mounted LED strips are used as a guide along the pathways, but they also create this really subtle pattern, and then that pattern is repeated along the pathway. They're spaced at 3-metre intervals, which produces a variation in light pattern. So we're not going for uniformity here, we're deliberately going for the pattern.
Because it's a fairly simple pathway, isn't
Absolutely.
it? But it's lit for a distance, so you can see where you're going, you're close to the building, so it doesn't need to be lit uniformly. The surface is not undulating.
No, you're looking for the decorative effect, but it still has a function. Further away from the building, there's a medium height column, which has a symmetrical distribution at the junction of the paths, and then also an asymmetrical version along the boardwalk. So here we're using the same type of luminaire with 2 different distributions where we need a different function.
So there's consistency in appearance, but there's variation in how they're actually
what they're
operating.
going to do, yeah, the function that they're going to have. And then we've got some small buried uplights for those trees, all important trees. And then here, this is a lovely decorative effect from some wall-mounted direct-indirect cubes, and they create this checkerboard effect, which is a luxury. It's a purely decorative effect, but it does create a statement about the building.
Let's hope that doesn't get cut from the budget.
That's the value engineering bit, we know that. So there's also a taller version of the same column, used here where the light is needed just that little bit more by the car parking spaces.
And these are about sort of 4 metres in height to give a good distribution.
So these, again, keeping the same visual element, but making sure that the function meets the need. So these are spaced at about 15 metres apart and give an average of 15 lux. There's a smaller version, which again keeps the same design language, but this time it's a bollard near where the pedestrians cross the road, and they give a visual clue to the drivers that are driving their cars that something's happening here. This is a pedestrian crossing.
So a safety zone.
It is. It's giving that extra message that any driver would always find.
And I suppose it's also encouraging the pedestrians to say this is where you should cross as well.
Absolutely, yeah. That's just guiding them in the place where we want them to cross the road.
Yeah.
So this is part of the final visual landscape. So it's showing how all of these different elements of exterior lighting build up to create a picture. And this is what we mean by indoor-outdoor lighting. So this is light around the building. We're not talking about street lighting, we're not talking about motorway lighting. This is the lighting that is still part of the visual environment around any interior space and should be considered as a part of that interior space.
Indeed.
Thank you for watching us, and we hope you can join us for the next TRILUX Academy training modules. For more information, please visit our website or sign up for the TRILUX newsletter. Thank you. Thanks, Sophie.